Welcome to Big Blend Radio's Parks and Travel podcast, covering parks, public lands, and historic landmarks across America and around the world. So welcome, everyone. Today we have Michael Calhoun joining us from Vernonia, Oregon. And what we're so excited about is that we're going to talk about a national recreational trail that is something that is really about how a community can take an old railroad, make it into a trail, and then it even gets this national designation. But it's really great for the communities, great for travelers. And Michael, welcome. How are you?
Great. And thanks again for having me.
And this is really true about sometimes we look at our backyard and kind of take it for granted, and then also maybe can kind of shy away from things that can have a positive change. And this is one of them, old railroads being turned into the Rails to Trails program, which is just an awesome organization, into a trail that people can enjoy in their backyard.
Yeah, no, what for years was seen as a derelict, section of town is really a place where you can revitalize a community. And so I can tell your listeners a little bit kind of where I'm from and how I
Yeah.
kind of got into all this. So I'm from Vernonia, Oregon. It's a small town northwest of Portland, which is the biggest
Mhm.
city in the state. And about 2,000 people live out here. And we had a railroad that was built in order to harvest our old growth trees that were around at the time. And that's how the town really economically took off in the 1920s. And that continued up until 1957. And in that time period, we had our claim to fame was the largest electric sawmill in the world. So we're proud of that. But when the mill shut down, like a lot of communities that were based in resource extraction, things economically, just socially, really took a slump. And eventually the railroad was abandoned in the 70s. And then for that time period, there were a group of folks in the 80s that the Rails to Trails was a program starting to come up in America around that time. And for your listeners, it's where old abandoned rail lines are converted into recreational pathways. And then in the late 80s, early 90s, the Banks-Vernonia Trail became the first Rails to Trail in the state of Oregon. So we're really
Oh,
proud of
wow.
that and
Yeah.
what it brought to our community. And then my involvement was years later, well, from its designation, but for me, just a recent history, I got it certified as a national recreation trail. And
Mhm.
of course, I can get into all that.
Yeah, because that is a lot of steps. It's like also trying to get a national heritage area together because it's community, right? It's not just, it's like everyone has to be on board for this. But for your town, I mean, so this slump happens, and we've been through, as you know, we travel full time documenting parks, public lands, and we have been through numerous towns that are like still hoping the mine will come back or completely shut down, but trying, and then they become bedroom communities. Everything's a little different. But the extraction, like you're saying, for resources, it's like this boom and bust, right? And you can even see it historically. Like there's a town, Rhyolite, out by Beatty, Nevada, right outside Death Valley, and it's like no one's there anymore. So it just kind of was this. People were fed a line in a way. It's like, come here, you're going to get rich, and it'll all be great. But everything really does shut down at a certain time once they've extracted. And then there's because mines and things like that have to have this recreate like reclamation, excuse me, that's a word, reclamation period. They're still around and they still kind of involved in the community. They'll may do some donations and things, but you know, and I'm not knocking the whole industries or anything because I mean, what do you think our cell phones are made of and toilet paper and things like that? But there's a balance that needs to happen. But there's this thing that happens when they stick around and communities almost hope they'll come back and rebuild. And it's not really happening. They just legally have to be there, right? In a way. But these things like the railroad end up abandoned. But how did your town go from that? And old growth forests being cut down just hurts my soul. But how did it like say, okay, we're not going to completely become a ghost town?
Well, and I echo that too, because my background is a conservationist. And so I able to wear both hats at the same time. I could, in my current life, I do what I can to protect nature, and then I could celebrate the history of a town and its foundations, but realizing that a lot of what did happen back in the day probably shouldn't have happened. They're different. Hindsight
Hmm.
in 2020. what our town was able to do, at least it embraces that heritage as a logging community, and we do have a friendship jamboree. It's our once a year big celebration that happened immediately
Mm,
after the mill closed as a way to for folks to still reconnect. And you're right about the industry still in the area, but it's not. It's a completely different model, and I would argue that there's some practices that I would like to see changed. Because currently, just as a quick side note, forestry in Oregon, at least primarily large scale private, is done by it's owned by Wall Street conglomerates that own the land. They clear cut it and they replant it, but
mm,
it's like planting corn. It's a monocrop plantation. It's all the same species, the same age. There's no biodiversity of
mm.
wildlife ecosystem. So that's kind of still a tug of war happening in the state of Oregon of how do we balance things out to where everyone could share in this resource. But as a side note for that. And then so our rails, like as you just mentioned, each town is kind of unique. And there are some way out there, like the one you just mentioned in Nevada, like that would be a challenging situation to
Mm.
revitalize a community like that. Vernonia happened to be, because it's less than an hour from the largest city in Oregon, Portland, our railway connected to them. So we had this section, it's about 20 miles. The Banks-Vernonia Trail
Okay.
is about 20 miles. And we have another rails to trail that opened up a few years ago called the Crown Zellerback Trail. The difference between them, one is paved and the other one is currently gravel. So Vernonia just happened to be kind of like, if you look at kind of like veins in an arm, or it's all these interconnected. So Vernonia just happened to be right connected there. And we do have an unofficial slogan, all roads lead to Vernonia. So
Okay.
no, it's a
I know
real
I've been through Vernonia. We have.
Oh,
Sure. Yep.
so we just happen to be lucky in that regard that we're
Mm.
just at the nexus of all these
You're a
interconnections.
crossroads community then.
Yes.
Cool.
So, but having the railroad, yeah, in the late 80s, early 90s, that really was able to pivot us towards tourism. And
Mm.
so we get a lot of bicyclists, and some of the businesses in town not only catered to bicyclists, they have designated bike racks, but we have some murals in town that celebrate like the art history of the town. We have bicyclists on the murals, so we were able to integrate the tourism in all sorts of different ways in the community just from having this trail as a resource now.
So the cyclist, I mean, that's really part of that light-footed traveler, respectful, kind of coming in the right kind of people you want to have in your town. And, when you think about all the cyclists, that's cool. So then that leads to, hey, not all of us can balance on a bike. I don't care what they say. Some of us can't, ride it like we were as a kid. We look at it and I'm already down. But anyway, but walking is something so important. And these trails, I mean, we even have a 1 hour walk Facebook group because it's about getting out. They say 150 minutes a week is what you're needed for your heart, for heart health. So there's all these, benefits, and community wise, when a community invests in something like a trail, and you went, and became national with this. So that's really cool. You also turned something historic into something that's usable instead of it becoming a brown zone, right? Turns into a green zone, but it's healthy. People can enjoy it. And it's also part of the tourism make it. So it has, when you have good health, you have economic benefits, I think, to a community. What do you think?
Yeah, and exactly. And as you're saying, for folks to not be intimidated because it's not out in the boonies, like what if you're on it, you have to go the whole way. What's great about especially how it was designed, there's lots of trail heads. So you can
Cool.
park your car every few miles and you could just do little sections of it
Hmm.
or the whole section. And it's for walking, joggers, equestrian, if you have a horse. And
Oh,
uh,
wow. So
so
multi-use.
and because it was a railroad grade, it's pretty level because the trains couldn't just go on a steep incline. So it's pretty level. And
Mm.
this one happens to be the if locally a qualifier for the Boston Marathon. So if you can run that and make the time, then you might
Wow.
qualify for Boston. So that's been a big draw to the community.
Wow. How many people do you have in the community, do
A
you think?
little over 2,000.
So it's a small town. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So what is the tourism side of it? Is that mostly for people just wanting to get out of the city and into nature? Because it doesn't sound like your city.
Right. Like you mentioned, bedroom community because we're less than an hour from Portland.
Hmm.
So we get a lot of folks out and or the people live here commute. But a lot of people, my dad is in real estate. People come
Mhm.
out here to specifically to get into nature, and because of the trail. Oh, the trail's here. Well, I mean, it's right here in town, and they want that kind
Nice.
of lifestyle and the community, and so it's been a big draw.
Well, I think Oregon and actually the Pacific Northwest as a whole has that kind of lifestyle of, okay, the weather can get, your Pacific Northwest weather, but like in summer, we're in the Southeast right now. I'm like, I'm dying. I'm dying. But I've also lived in the desert and you're dying, but you also find your lifestyle goes with the weather and you work around it. When we lived out in Tucson or Joshua Tree area too, you just go out 4 in the morning hikes and you're seeing the sunrise over the desert, which you can't, I mean, it's just mind blowing, right? So everywhere has its place of when to go out, but you can be year round, and walking again is one of the easier things and getting on a trail. So, but tell us, obviously you're at Crossroads, you've got all these different trailheads. A lot of people had to get involved. So when was it when they said, "Hey, we're going to make this a trail," because you've got train tracks too to look at and all of that. So how long has this been in to just make it feasible to walk on?
The heavy work for that. I mean, I don't always try to date myself, but it was a little bit before I was around, and so in the late '80s. But I know it was county commissioners, city
Wow.
council, and yeah, allocating the money. So there was a lot of internal politics in order to get this. And I will tell you, before my dad was a realtor, he was a high school teacher of history, and when the trail was being developed or the idea of it, yeah, it was a hot topic in the community at the time. So he would have the students do a pro and con list of
Mm.
what benefits, what negative, and I always share this because one of them, the negative, well, they might chase the cows, but they're people that they worry, because some trails, and especially in
Hmm.
the deep urban zones, have been not what they anticipated it would be. So some of the concerns were that it might increase crime, property crime, violent crime, but 30 years later, I can tell you that that hasn't happened.
It's like the opposite, isn't it?
Exactly. So that was, I know, through the generational history of the town, that was the concern at the time. What's
Mhm.
it going to bring to the community? Because I understand everyone's community. You feel that it's special, and you want to keep it special. You don't want to turn it into a metropolis or something that it's not meant to be.
Right.
So there was that concern, but as we mentioned earlier, for towns that are built on resource extraction, we're not an island unto ourselves. We are all interconnected here in America. We
Mhm.
you just can't build a King Kong wall and no one in or out. So this is
Don't get me started. But well, no, but it's really true because you know change, whenever there's something about change, the immediate response is fear and that you're going to lose something instead of gain something. But a trail, that's what I was saying, it's a light-footed tourism. It's not someone coming to Disneyland.
yeah, when you have a community that's shut off like that, you can be proud of your history, but what good is it if nobody else knows about it? And
Mm,
so what we've been able to do is at the different trailheads have informational kiosks
mhm,
that talk about not only the logging history, but the human history, the natural history. So the visitors can take that with them back to their home, and maybe it might spark an idea of a project they could work on
mhm,
locally. And so it was a way to have people come, but also celebrate our history, and they now know about the
mhm.
town's timeline, and then that's
It's
important.
economically beneficial too. Because a town, if it closes itself off, like if you wall yourself off as a town, you're just going to be handing the same dollar around to each other. And
Mm.
then if something happens and you can't go outside for help, well, there you went. You know what I mean? That's why, I mean, society works in groups and community, period, no matter how you look at it. And this is like a cool community project that obviously went through some, a lot of steps to get there. So it becomes a trail. And then what happens going, hey, let's make this part of a national recreation trail, which is actually part of the National Park Service, which is one of the biggest jobs we have is to explain to people a national monument or the Pony Express Trail. There's recreation areas, there's all these different things. In fact, our smallest national park unit is up in Vancouver, Washington, not far from you. So like there's all these different forms of what the National Park Service does to, really protect and interpret our history and our nature. So this is one of those things. So is it just that part of the trail? Is that a national historic trail, a national trail, not a historic trail? But is it, or does it connect to others?
Well, so that's where I got involved, and my mind is always on conservation-oriented projects. What can I work on? I currently chair the Columbia Soil Water Conservation District,
Cool.
and that covers the area. And so I'm always on the lookout of like what cool thing could I look at. And what happened was just a few years ago, I was on a trail on the coast because Oregon's a coastal state, and I saw a red, white, and blue sign that
Yeah.
said National Recreation Trail. I didn't know
Hmm.
what it was, so when I looked it up, I thought, whoa, we could get
Yeah.
trail certified, which it hadn't been as the first Rails to Trails, but it hadn't received this designation. So for your listeners out there, a national recreation trail is a certification for existing land-based trails from the National Park Service, overseen by the Department of Interior, and it was created in 1968 under the National Trail System Act. Currently, there's over 1,300 national recreation trails, or NRT
Wow.
for short, with at least one in every state. And it doesn't have to be a rails to trail. It could be just whatever the unique history is of a trail. It has to be, it could be public or private land, but it has to be publicly accessible. So it
Mm.
can have multiple owners, and it could be a few feet, it could be over 1,000 miles. But it basically, if you apply for this designation, what makes this trail special? What's its unique history, be it man-made or natural features? So that's what I got involved with, and we got the whole trail, all 20 miles of it, certified. And then after that, I worked on getting the Crown Zellerback Trail. Well, actually, exact opposite. CZ was first, and then Banks-Vernonia a year later was second. So over 40 miles of trail in Vernonia is right in the middle, kind of like a horseshoe.
Nice.
And yeah, and so what I really thank you again for the opportunity to be able to talk about this, because what I hope is for your listeners anywhere in America, if you know of a special trail, you can apply this to that trail. And I could touch in a little bit about kind of conservation and kind of for any.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, but I want to go back a little bit here. The importance of having the National Park Service be part of it, of the protections, because right now I just want to say we want as many protections as possible because depending on who is a leading things, sometimes they get stripped away. But the more we have, the more of a wall we have for, you know what I mean? Now we're back to walls. I don't want to talk about walls, but I want to talk about trails. They're open. But you know what I mean? The protections are super important because, and we want to get into the conservation part of that too, because the trails, like we are saying, healthy for people, but if it's healthy for the natural world, that's going to benefit us and vice versa, right?
Well, and what's really cool is if when you get a trail certified, you
Hmm.
get a plaque that's signed by the Secretary of the Interior. And as for us being such a small rural community, to actually have a hand signed.
National designation. Yeah.
Yeah, so we proudly display that. I mean, that's really cool to have that. So when you get certified, it change how the trail is managed. That was part of the conversations we did have, because both trails
Okay.
are overseen. One is the state parks, one is the county. Personally, I would love to see it have teeth to it. That certain things you can or can't do, but what it can do, it really elevates the status of a trail. So, like you're mentioning, if there was any kind of, let's say, maybe big development project and it's going to bulldoze its way, having that status is a layer of protection that this is a special trail, and that it can't be just sliced and diced anyway. Come have you. It has to have a guarantee that this trail will exist.
And that's a really big deal right now in regards to like our national forests. I mean, hundreds of thousands of acres of our national forests are now set up to be cleared, and a lot of it is going to end up in real estate. But you've got real estate in your family, so you kind of understand. And I hope you guys are being
Small real estate, small real
yeah,
estate.
yeah. I'm just saying, like, it's a small town, but it's that's an important deal because it's kind of opening up our public lands to have there's got to be a balance, and we need a balance in our forests, our BLM land. All of that kind of land has always helped to be a buffer zone between, national parks and industry. Like here in the Southeast, there's the Appalachian Trail, but there's industry crouching in, data centers crouching in, even towns crouching in on this trail, which is a huge trail, as we all know. Pacific Crest Trail is near you. You know, it is so crucial. And the more of these kinds of trails that you're having, that network kind of like is another little protection unit is from that kind of thing. Yes, we need houses. Yes, we need homes, but there's also a balance to that. How many homes do we all need? Sorry, your dad's going to kill me.
Well, he actually no that how I kind of got into all this was through my parents. My dad
Mm.
taught ecology and history, and one thing led to another, and so no, I credit him and my mom
And I'm
for
not anti-real estate whatsoever. We all need a home. So,
as you mentioned, yeah, there's always like nuance. I think there's a fine line between I think like a hometown realtor, but as I mentioned earlier, we have Wall Street, firms that they tens of thousands of acres. That's considered real estate, but in my view, that's not the kind of real estate we want out here. We want the forest to be accessible for people. You can have resource extraction, but not at the cost of the
oh,
community. And if that revenue is not even coming back to the community, it kind of just
good point.
goes
Very good
elsewhere.
point.
What I really liked about receiving this designation and for your listeners is it's a way to bring something of the National Park Service and Interior to your community because it's really, really, really hard to get a national park, a new national park, or even a national monument.
Yeah.
So it's a way to bring a smaller version of that world to your community to be a part of the national park just in some way shape or form. So that's what's been really cool is we have that now in our backyard. It's in the family of the National Park Service to have this trail. So
And that
that's
can lead to other things because it's a trail, but it leads to things like a heritage area because you've got the lumber history, which is part of America's story. Like we look at America 250, lumber is part of our backbone. The railroad is part of our history. This country would be night and day different if it wasn't for the railroad, right? But we've learned a whole bunch of things, but in the meantime, but it's still, we need to not erase our history. So when you have something like this, National Recreation Trail, that means, hey, we care about our community, the health, the nature, the natural and the human history. But like if you want to expand on that or something else needs to be protected near you or around you or in the community, that kind of can help, I think, too.
exactly, exactly. Like you said, it could amplify it, sort of shield it if you want to go pursue other. I'm a huge fan of certifications, so yeah, you do this one and that one, and there's a lot you could tie them all together, and you can really fortify a community in different ways. That if we have another recession or for a depression, you when you have a community, it's fortified because it's spent the time to have this certification, that certification. It can weather the storm more than communities that just didn't choose to be involved in that kind of way. So
Yeah.
yeah, no, one thing leads to another. That's what my experience has been. This leads to this leads to this, and getting folks involved. Part of the conversation that I did have with some of the committees that currently oversee the trails, you mentioned earlier, Disneyland was brought up. We want to make sure is it going to turn it into something that's not, but these trails are meant for foot traffic. Not of course, you know, a Highway 101 or something like that, but
Yeah, yeah.
it's meant for people to use. And I'm always aware, I bring this story up in different interviews that there's a grove of redwoods in California, and these ones were specifically kept secret because the root systems of those trees are so shallow. And especially today with selfies and all that, people trample on the tree trying to get this picture. So this grove was kept secret on purpose, and somebody discovered it and posted the GPS coordinates, and people started trampling them, taking their selfies. So they ended up building a boardwalk. It's not perfect, but it alleviates the foot traffic. And I always remember that story because whenever I work on a project with a certification, I want to make sure it's not accidentally going to turn something into something that's going to be loved to death.
Mhm.
So I was mindful of that when I pursued this. But again, these trails are meant to be. They can handle the selfies. So
But they're also really good because it's, you're in forest area too, right? So you're also looking at this habitat that you're protecting for birds, whether they're migrating or residents. and just for wildlife and allowing things to actually come back. When we talk about, mass logging or any kind of extraction, and nature knows how to come back versus how to do the monocrop, like what you're talking about. Nature goes, no, bird's going to go, I'm going to poop this seed over here. And another bird's going to go, well, I'm going to do a different poop with a different seed, over here. And we have biodiversity, which is cool. So I think that's the other thing about this, that you create this corridor and animals know, like, that's the human corridor. We can, hang out around them or whatever. Maybe a deer will come across or whatever. But everybody kind of gets into knowing their place with things like this. It becomes like a different highway, but slowed way down.
Exactly. And for people to care about something, they have to know about something. And getting people out in nature to be able to see the birds and the trees, and you can smell the just the nature, the flowers. If you don't experience that, when something in the news later are going to bulldoze this or this is going to be demolished, you got to care about it, but you got to know about it in order to care about it. So the trails are a great way for people to get out and like you mentioned, the different ecological zones, whether it's the desert or the tundra forest. People in their backyard have some really unique features, but if you're not aware of them, you might not be out there signing the petition to save them. So you got to
Yeah, right.
trails offer that, and that's been our experience. Is it gets people out here and they seem to care, at least locally, about the different issues.
Mm. So getting it started, for people listening that have been looking at these kinds of projects in their backyard, I know some, just off the top of my head. And, are you going to have to go through local community meetings, and I think that's kind of good. I think a community that can get together over a project will stay more of a happier community. There's always a, little friction,
Oh, oh
but
yeah,
it
I was
would be
going to get
boring
into
without
that.
it.
Yeah.
You're going to have it. But it's a really cool thing when a community comes together over something like this. And I think, and for small towns too, it lets the youth know that the adults care about them and their future. And kids normally fly off and they maybe come back to a small town if they're lucky, normally when they're ready to retire. But when there's things that are set in place, and I don't know, it just lets people have some pride over where they live when you do these kinds of things. Did you experience that going through the process of going national with it?
Yeah, and so for your listeners, if you're wanting to seek National Recreation Trail status, of course, you have to find out who's either the owner or manager of the trail, because sometimes you can have an owner that's kind of doing their own thing. They let state parks or somebody oversee it. So it's
Okay.
whatever entity, and sometimes you can have multiple entities overseeing the trail, depends how long it is and its history. My advice is that you have to be both passionate and persistent. You have to actually really got a fire in you to move it forward, because you're going to run into, well, you don't know what you're going to run into, but there's always going to be some kind of roadblock or technicality or a question that you have to come back with. So you really got to do your homework first. It's easy to go to a council meeting really quick, say this is a great idea. They're going to be like, cool, you do it. So you gotta
That's
you
what's
gotta
good. That's true.
so my advice is do your research, have everything prepared as best you can, then present it, make a presentation to the entity or committee that oversees it, and just have good working relationships with people. Know that there's a lot of personalities.
Hmm.
That's the thing. You got to kind of be aware. Everybody's different background, different views, different flair. So that was my experience. But if you get past all that and just know that there's an end goal, that's what can get the certification.
And you will have people that jump on with you for sure.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. No, that's what's great is my I got to meet people I wouldn't have known otherwise. I got people that were also passionate about the trail, and we had the shared interest, and so it was bringing community together. Sometimes it was like a Parks and Rec episode. There were a few wonky things here and there that but that's life. But
That
overall,
makes good gossip. Come on now. Every town has some good gossip, but I just think it's a really healthy thing. And what's it like with the Rails to Trails program? I mean, that's an epic program, I think, nationally.
yeah, being able to tie those two together was really awesome. And then for your listeners, separately from National Recreation Trail, there's rails or trails, and maybe you might have an abandoned rail line in your backyard, and
Mhm.
maybe it just hasn't found the right people to advocate for it.
Mhm.
And you could be that advocate if you know of a trail that is just there's a lot of potential and it just needs some passionate folks to get behind it. And so
Mhm.
for that, there's the Rails to Trails Conservancy. They're the organization that oversees that. They're great. And for anyone wanting to pursue National Recreation Trail, you should check out American Trails. They're the
Okay.
organization nonprofit that can help guide you through the process, making sure you have every I dotted, T crossed, and they'll review it, and then you could officially send it in to get submitted.
Okay. Now you talk about like the owners of the trail or the keepers of the trail kind of thing, right? So it could be private land, maybe it's not, maybe it's state land, but there's this really cool trail that connects it, which could actually help save a park at the end of the day if it's got this extra certification, as you're saying, right? So when you look at that, who is maintaining these trails? And that has got to be one of the first questions that community goes, well, do I have to pick up the trash every week? Is it always me? Can somebody else come on board? And, what happens if there's a flood or, there's all these things that can happen that really have to be looked at. And every place is going to be a little different with that. But maintenance of a trail is important. And that's in every park, and it's hard with, some trails that go off into like the Wonderland Trail. Is it the Wonderland Trail up in Mount Rainier and stuff like that? Who's going to go out there and clean it every day? It's not happening.
Well, and that's what is uniquely challenging at the time of this airing
Hmm.
is that there's plenty of money, but it's not being directed at things it could be directed at. And one of the things is the trails systems in America and just our national parks in general. They have a backlog of upkeep and maintenance. So it is a unique moment to be living through. I do have hope one day we are going to have a whole new crop of people that are going to have, invest in things that need to be invested in that'll actually improve material conditions for everyday Americans. And one of those is being able to access outdoors without worrying that the bathrooms aren't working or that there's bumps in the trail so that your bike has an accident. So for your listeners, like it really depends what entity. It could be state parks or county. You just have to do your research, and they should, if it's an active trail, have a maintenance plan. But if it's not up to par, that's where you could be an advocate and be, well, maybe we could do a grant here, or, if there's a way to be involved for that. What the National Recreation Trail status does, it doesn't guarantee a grant, but it does elevate your trail name to the top of the list, because if you're going against different competitors and they see that you're certified and the others aren't, this trail's
Mm.
got it's got people that actually cared enough to actually pursue this. So it doesn't guarantee it, but it pretty much puts you at the top if you're
Mm.
seeking funding, and that could be used towards enhancement or repair. And just so I make sure I get it out for everyone, the trail has to be completed. It can't be in progress. It's got to
Okay.
be actually done. But if you ever add a section in the years to come, you can later reapply to have that section added to the certification. So if because that's what's kind of happening here, we have a little bridge we're wanting to connect over the river. It's not done yet, but once it is, then we'll apply to have that added.
Also added in to the trail on the national side of it. Wow. So much to think about. And for your community, how long has it been national?
2 years, so
Okay.
that's
What are some of the
recent.
benefits to share with people now that that part has been there? Has anything changed in the 2 years?
It's kind of like having as a megaphone for the trail. So we have a park superintendent. We have a state park that's in the middle of where the trail is, and he has said that people have been coming specifically because they found out it was certified, and so that just alone has brought more people to check out the trail, and then thus brings them to the community to eat at the restaurant and
Hmm.
recreate. So yeah, so just it's think of it as like a megaphone. It gets the word out there more so than had it not been certified.
Okay, so it's good. So tourism, I mean, it's like when someone just fills up for gas or even gets a cup of coffee, that's helping the community, you know? Temporary community members.
Mhm.
Hmm. Do you have hotels and things like that in your town?
We had a
Or,
very small motel. It's been converted into sort of a residential. It kind of it
okay.
goes back and forth. But we do have a Stub Stewart State Park is just outside of Vernonia, and they have cabins there or you can tent sites. And yeah, just having the state park adjacent to it has been a
That's
big draw.
perfect. That's perfect. So that helps the state park too. And the more people that go to these parks, the more they can stand and say, we need to keep the park, right? Does that help as well?
Yeah, and what another project I've been working on is another certification. But anybody, this is what great. Anybody that lives in this country, you can work towards this. I've been trying to work to get Vernonia certified as a dark sky community. That's where we prevent
Oh,
light pollution. Very quick side note: what's happening in America? If you travel around towns, it used to be high pressured sodium, the dark orange lights that illuminated our streets. They're being replaced with LEDs, which are energy efficient, but they can be any color of the rainbow. And a lot of them are choosing hospital white, which is really bad for light pollution, the birds and migration. So what I'm trying to do is couple the color of amber colored streetlights with the technology of LED. And our state park here is looking to become a dark sky park.
stick.
So it's another ecotourism to tie into the trail. So you could just one on top of another certifications.
That's it's really huge when you talk about that because, these birds and bats and birds migrate at night and I didn't know that until a few years ago and I was like, oh wow, there's a whole world going on when we sleep. And also if you don't have clear skies, it's telling you something about where you are, the health of it. At the same time, having these dark skies, you're helping with the pollution. I mean, the birds migrating, but these are all pollinators. So when we think about our food, if we didn't have these migrations and this life after we turn our lights out, we don't have food, quite frankly, at the end of the day. So it's really, really important, but it's also that thing where, my gosh, you can get away from the city, get out into the countryside and look up and see the stars. And for kids, I mean, come on. We all know when we actually get to see the night sky, how cool it is. But yeah, we're about to go do some night sky watching with infrared military cameras. And
Oh,
apparently, you see so many satellites in the sky that they're all looking like they're crashing into each other. And that's something when you have a dark sky, we actually need to start monitoring. And the more we're not watching what's going on our skies, I think we're really being unaware as the dwellers of this universe, on this planet. We need to watch what's going on in the skies. And it's just so far away that we're not realizing it, you know?
no, and that like you mentioned, everything's interconnected,
Hmm.
and for the folks out there wanting to be involved, it just don't let it get overwhelmed with things. But I've really had fun when you find one thing and it leads to another, and overall, in totality, you could have a community that really celebrates natural resources and
Hmm.
ecotourism, and they all tied together. That's why
Hmm.
I didn't know the dark sky was going to then one thing, yeah, it just that kind of came out
It
after the
is.
project, and I'm like, oh, I could do this, and then but
And then you can have an planetarium. I bet you, I've watched that happen. Honestly, I've actually seen that happen with places. The other thing too, with the dark sky, which is again so important because we're looking at the pollution of our skies and then being able to enjoy the skies and learn, is also the fact that the protection. Like right now, one of the things that will help Chaco Canyon from the it has this acreage around it that's the last 90% of the land in New Mexico around Chaco Canyon, which protects these ceremonial sites, ancient Puebloan ceremonial sites. 90% of it is already out to drilling and fracking and everything. And right now, and we've done many shows of this to get this bill passed to protect and keep that buffer zone. Well, of course, just like a lot of our parks, it's back up to we're going to want to drill it and frack it. Now, we drive the country at night, and I can tell you there are no dark skies if you have any kind of oil and gas out there. You don't. And in fact, you have pollution. You can breathe it in and taste it, and it's not that nice. So if they do that outside Chaco, which is an international dark sky park, which has a planetarium, an observatory, what do you think is going to happen to that? But so having that on top of other statuses, all those certifications you're talking about, World Biosphere, all those kinds of things, when something is being attacked for any reason, when you have that list, like you're saying, I mean, I bow down on that because the more you have stacked up, the more you're going to be able to protect that park, which will also protect your community, just like oil and gas and like Grand Canyon having coal plants and right outside the Navajo Nation and people getting cancer from that. And it took forever to get that to be just upgraded, you know. So all those statuses of protection, it's crucial. So once you get started, keep going. Don't stop. Just keep
Yeah,
going.
yeah.
Gather those certifications, you know?
No, and like you said, a lot of these, multi-billion-dollar resources, they're predatory. They go after communities that are impoverished, and they're not there to help. They're there to take advantage of you. But if you're a community with advocates that can see that we have other resources that we can use as an asset to us rather than just whittling it down to the last little drop of oil, we could have a park, we could have a trail, dark sky, bicycles.
Trees.
Yeah, exactly. So there's so much you could celebrate with what you have and add those certifications up, and it does create a shield that we are a community that doesn't need you to come in, take what you want, and leave us impoverished after you go. We are self-sustaining with our resources that have been here. So yeah.
And healthy and happy.
Mhm. Yeah.
Awesome. Fantastic. And power to you all. Everybody's need to go visit, you know, go visit and check it out and go to the state park and go walking, biking, horse riding. So very cool. Very cool. Thanks for sharing this information with everybody.
Well, thank you again for the opportunity, and your listeners just check out American Trails. They'll help guide you a National Recreation Trail. Like I said, from there you just take it away, and you'll have fun with the experience and helping your own community and the communities that are next to you. Everyone's interconnected.
Absolutely. I love that. It's a trail leads to somewhere, doesn't it? Even the forks come back together at the end of it. So everyone, I've got links in the episode notes, so check that out. Thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us here on Big Blend Radio's Parks and Travel podcast. Visit nationalparktraveling.com to plan your next park adventure and to see our Parks and Travel digital magazine. You can keep up with our shows at bigblendradio.com.